This is Still Here, Still Queer Now What, the podcast, your companion to queer midlife. I'm Dr. Paul Taylor-Pitt. I'm the author of Still Here, Still Queer Now What, the book, coming everywhere 21st of October. So my voice is almost back to normal after Pride weekend, although still a little bit husky. So I do have some water with me. I don't. I have coffee with me. It's early. I'm going to take a swig of coffee, which is always good podcast content. Drum roll. Today is the Madonna episode. Now, I know that might immediately make some of you want to switch off. And I debated in my head today, should I do this? Is it interesting to anyone apart from me? I feel like there's such a story going back to childhood of Madonna in my life. And so how I decided I was going to do this, initially it was going to be just like here's an album review of the new album, and we might come to that, who knows. Instead, I decided to open up the big container that sits under the bed of my Madonna stuff and tell you a story about my life in Madonna moments. Because when I think about it, she has in some way been part of my life for almost as long as my oldest friend. And I don't believe for a second that we have any kind of parasocial relationship or friendship. But she's been there as long as I can remember. So I dug out some of my favorite bits of Madonna stuff, whether it's merchandise, music, books. It turns out I actually have enough Madonna books to probably do a separate episode on the books of Madonna. But we'll save that for another time. So, yeah, I wonder what we'll discover. I haven't really planned this. There were certain things, certain bits that I pulled out of the box and I thought, well, yeah, that has a memory, that has a resonance. And so I thought I would just take you through some of these things and tell you my life in Madonna, how she has woven in and out of my life over the decades, and some of the important moments, some of the things that stand out as memorable. Ready? So there are here, this pile of stuff is here. I'm going to start with this, which I think might be my oldest piece of Madonna merchandise. This is the 7-inch picture disc of Into the Groove. It's very discolored, as you can see. It's covered in tobacco. So I used to smoke and had no idea that this would turn fag yellow, which I guess could be a new Pantone colour. On the back, it's got the Desperately Seeking Susan newspaper advert, and obviously it's shaped like a heart. Do they make stuff like this anymore? I don't know. Into the Groove, I will die on this hill that says is the best song ever made, the best pop song ever made. I don't know. I go between, is it my favourite Madonna song? I think it's the best pop song ever made. But my favourite Madonna song's a bit more dynamic. It changes at times. But Into the Groove holds a special place. Growing up in Aberdeen, I used to go to, I think at the time it was Our Price Records. It may have even changed to Virgin Records. But I remember going into the music shop in what was called Union Street, the High Street. And up on the first floor was the music video section. And Madonna's Virgin tour had come out on VHS, and they used to show it on these little TVs, and I would just stand there. I must have been about 11, 12 years old. I'd just stand there watching her on stage, and particularly Into the Groove was my favourite. I remember getting the video for Christmas. I memorised every line. I can still quote it verbatim. I probably know the dance moves. The number of times I performed Into the Groove with the lid from a biscuit tin as my tambourine. I still wish one day I would have a jacket like the Into the Groove, like the Virgin Tour costume. There was once when I was at school doing a play, and we were asked to bring in different parts of a costume, and my character, I think, might have been a soldier, but I had to bring in boots. And so I brought in a pair of my mum's boots, a pair of these high-heeled blue boots, because they reminded me of the ones that Madonna wore on the Virgin tour. And that did not go down well. That was not okay. Everyone laughed, and I couldn't understand why. These were just amazing boots. So Into the Groove has a special triggering memory, but I do think that the time I spent watching the Virgin tour must have imprinted somehow, because it still holds an important part of my life. The Desperately Seeking Susan DVD, we don't even have anything to watch this on anymore. What a fantastic film. I remember it was also the first time, not the first time, it definitely wouldn't have been the first time, one of the more significant times when I told a lie at school, because I must have been maybe 13 when this came out. I don't know. And I lied to my friends and said that I'd been to the cinema to see it. It was a 15 certificate, so obviously that wasn't going to happen. But I remember lying to my friends and saying, yeah, I've seen Desperately Seeking Susan. And I made up this whole story about what the film was about, which was taken from clips from the Into the Groove video. There's a part of the Into the Groove video where Madonna's face kind of morphs into this background of stars and she disappears off into space. And so I told people that Desperately Seeking Susan was a science fiction film and that it was about Madonna going into space. Obviously, got found out pretty quickly that I hadn't seen the film. Moving on into the Like a Prayer era, I found this. This is, again, I've no idea what I would play this on. This is a 3-inch CD single of Cherish. And I love that when so it's a little gatefold, you open it up and it has an advert for the Like a Prayer album. Look at this, the size of this tiny little CD single. There was a phase of 3-inch CD singles. I used to go into town each weekend with my pocket money and I would usually buy a single. And then CDs started to come out and CD singles came out. What I particularly love about Cherish and this CD single, there's 3 tracks on this. It has Supernatural, which is a song Madonna wrote about having sex with a ghost. Always think it's a classic. But Like a Prayer, I guess, was when I started to get into Madonna, like, quite seriously. I remember writing essays about it and debating with my friend Diane whether the song Like a Prayer was really about oral sex or not, which I still stand by. Yes, it is. But this was teeing me up for my first ever big Madonna adventure, which was the Blonde Ambition tour in 1990. And I have photographic proof that I was at the Blonde Ambition tour. These photos, they show nothing. They show the backs of people's heads. But this was Wembley Stadium in 1990. These were photos that I took from a smuggled in disposable camera. Now, if you imagine Wembley Stadium is a big place, it was getting dark. A disposable camera with a built-in flash, all it does is it lights up the heads of the people in front of you. But these are my proof. I was there. I was there in 1990. Blonde Ambition, the program, this travel, I mean, it's massive. Look how big this is. This traveled back with me from London to Aberdeen and I protected it with my life. I still think this is one of the best tour programs ever. I mean, it's massive. It's amazing. My parents somehow agreed to let me go. They paid £20 for the ticket. And I think I took the train down to London. I was given a chaperone. My mum's assistant, Pamela, I say my mum's assistant like she was glamorous and rich. My mum was an administration manager in a car company and she had a team of 2. They were both called Pamela. They were both brilliant. And one of the Pamelas was hugely into Erasure and, the kind of pop music of its time. So Pamela agreed to be my chaperone. And we travelled down to London. We queued all day in the boiling heat. I remember the heat was so much. When I sat on the pavement, I got melted tar on my Madonna t-shirt. I was not happy. The Blonde Ambition tour was my first ever time away from Aberdeen, actually. First ever time in London. It was the first time I developed a crush on an actual gay man. This man who was dancing in front of me. And I still remember, I spent so much time focusing on him. He had on a white polo shirt, pink shorts. He had green eyes and kind of not bleached blonde hair, like streaks. When in the 90s we had streaks in our hair. He looked like he could have been in the band Big Fun, that kind of look. But I just remember completely falling in love with him. Never said a word to him, but I just thought, there's gay people here. This is where I need to be. And went back home to Aberdeen and decided that was it. I was going to move to London, which I did the next year. So yeah, 16-year-old me at that Madonna concert, that was a formative moment. And in the time between going to Blonde Ambition and leaving for London, In Bed with Madonna came out, which I still find it hard to call it Truth or Dare. I mean, again, this is the DVD of Truth or Dare. In Bed with Madonna, as you might know, is the documentary that she made of the Blonde Ambition tour. And I think when I counted it, I saw this in the cinema something like 17 times over the summer before I moved to London. So that would have been the summer of 1991. And I remember, obviously, it was the only way you could watch it was in the cinema. So I remember going again and again and again and reliving those concert moments, reliving that feeling of being in London, of being with that gay person in front of me. And also the fact that suddenly Madonna was talking about queerness and showing the gayness of her dancers, the queerness of her dancers. I remember the scene where they're at the Pride March in New York and they're chanting, "We're here, we're queer, get used to it." And then it goes silent and they give a moment's silence to people who were dying of AIDS. At that time, it was unthinkable that this was happening in our community. And obviously there wasn't a huge amount of positive gay-related conversation around that, if any. I remember being at home when the "Don't Die of Ignorance" tombstone leaflets would pop through the door. And Truth or Dare in Bed with Madonna gave me a piece of hope that it was okay to be gay, that we could grow up and we could be on stage, we could live our dreams, we could do whatever we like, because the alternative that was being talked about was just that we would be dead. That was it. That if you were gay at that time, you would just be dead. I think on some level, I picked up the belief that I would just be dead by the time I was 30. So, thankfully that didn't happen. Still here, still queer. So yeah, In Bed with Madonna, Truth or Dare was a big thing. And then it must have come on TV. I think it must have come on Sky TV. And at that time you could still record stuff on VHS. So I recorded it and took it to London with me and must have watched it 10 million times. Again, memorized every single word. Around about that time, this book came out, which is one of my favorite books. This is Madonna, the Rolling Stone Files. And I didn't get this until a few years later. I got this around about 97, 98, my first ever trip to New York. But this has every interview, every article that was published about Madonna in Rolling Stone magazine from the early 80s all the way through to 97, to the Evita days. It's got this amazing Jean-Baptiste Mondino photo, which I just think is incredible. And also this contains my favorite ever interview with Madonna that was done by Carrie Fisher. Now, Carrie Fisher, obviously Princess Leia and so much more. I grew up wanting to be Princess Leia. I was not interested in being Han Solo or Luke Skywalker. I wanted to kiss Han Solo. And so I wanted to be Princess Leia. So I always had such a soft spot in my heart for Carrie Fisher. And I was over the moon when Carrie Fisher interviewed Madonna at the time of Truth or Dare. And it was a 2-part interview. It was called True Confessions. Put a pin in that for later. And reading back on it now, it's so personal. It's so vulnerable. Carrie Fisher writes, "I was late for that first meeting because a friend who had AIDS and who was staying with me had suddenly developed a fever. I called Madonna to say I was on my way. 'You're late,' she informed me. I explained about my friend. 'Well, okay, that's a good excuse,' she said. By the time of our final meeting, the following week, my friend had died. He had been extremely courageous, fighting an unbelievable battle. I relate this because it factored somehow into our meetings, making them even more bizarre and certainly changing the tone of our conversation from time to time." This book itself is such a historical guide to what was going on through the 80s and 90s, but I just love this Carrie Fisher interview. I think it's so powerful, so personal. Also, really interesting to see Madonna interviewed by another smart woman, because most of the interviews back then were done by seemingly or not smart men. And so to have Madonna and Carrie Fisher kind of sparring and sharing their vulnerabilities is just my favorite thing ever. Another key moment a few years later, the sex book. I mean, look at this thing. It's a big one, isn't it? The sex book came out, I think, I'm going to make this up, September 92. Oh, I'm going to have to look up this. Oh, this is really annoying. Why can I not remember when the sex book came out? I can't remember the date, but I remember exactly where I was. I remember I was on a training course by an organization called the West London Health Promotion Agency. And I was on an HIV awareness facilitation training course because while I was a student at university, I was really involved in HIV prevention work and used to run sessions for students. We used to go into nightclubs and run these things called sex caves, which were like these small kind of tented areas that we would put up and talk about safer sex and give out condoms. And West London Health Promotion Agency was the place that trained me as a trainer. The first time that I'd ever run workshops and training courses. And the HIV and AIDS Awareness Facilitators training course, get that in your mouth, day one was on the day that Madonna's sex book came out. It was in Hounslow. I remember at lunchtime saying, I need to go. And I went to WH Smith in Hounslow. I mean, who would have known you could buy Madonna's sex book there? I spent my £25. I came back and the crowd of people gathered around as I pulled off the silver wrapping and we flicked through the book. And it was actually a really good conversation starter because there we were talking about safer sex, talking about queer sex, talking about things that were never really talked about. And Madonna was talking about some of those similar things. So the sex book, I remember it so vividly, kind of bringing it back and opening it up. And that training course that I did has really shaped the rest of my career. It meant that I then volunteered for the Terence Higgins Trust. I was running training courses for them, training volunteers. It meant that when I got my first ever job in a home care agency, I pitched for and won the contract to provide HIV care services in London and Hackney, and then trained care assistants to work in that space. And that led me to become the first ever training manager for that organization. So again, a thread that runs through important moments of my life. And round about this time, things were getting a bit more serious when people were talking about Madonna. I found this book, which I just love. It's called I Dream of Madonna, Women's Dreams of the Goddess of Pop. This came out, I think, around about 97, or maybe a bit earlier, 93 it was. And this is a collection of stories, photos, collages, and women telling their stories about when they've dreamed of Madonna. And I have dreamed of Madonna so many times. There have been so many dreams I've had where we've been friends, or I've been at a concert and she's invited me backstage, or I've been to her house. And every time I wake up, I just feel a bit sad. I feel a bit sad that it's not real. But I was very glad to see that it's not just me. It's not just me that dreams about Madonna. And this is such a cool little book. It's this fabric covered hardback book. Now and again, I pull it out and go, oh yeah, it's not just me. But this is a very cool piece of merch. The next thing that stood out for me was the Ray of Light era. And I don't know how you would describe this. This is the Ray of Light lenticular CD. And this, I've never been able to describe it. Maybe there's a Pantone reference for it. Ray of Light blue is my favorite color ever. I think this color of blue is just incredible. Great to see it back in the Danceteria video. Maybe we'll talk about that. But this blue that Madonna was wearing on the jacket, on the cover, just incredible. Ray of Light reminds me of the time that I was in that role, that training role. I was working in King's Cross, which is very different back then than it is now. King's Cross was the kind of place you would go if you wanted drugs or sex. And for some reason, my company decided that that's where their training center was going to be. People used to get really scared walking to it. They used to be ringing the buzzer to get in and have to be climbing over people who were doing all kinds of things on the doorstep. But this Ray of Light reminds me of that time. It reminds me of getting up in the morning and going to HMV on Oxford Street to buy the cassette so that I could listen to it on my Walkman on the way to work the day it came out. And I used to be able to measure the time it would take to go from work to home. I was living in Wembley at the time, and I would leave work, I would press play, Drowned World, and then I would get home just at the point in Nothing Really Matters where it kind of goes into a breakdown, because we used to have an answering machine that would beep, and it sounded like the beep in Nothing Really Matters. Very random. I've also got this amazing tattoo. I think that came in some kind of merch that I must have ordered from the Madonna fan club. But it's a ray of light tattoo that you can use. And then this slightly out of sync bedtime story. This was another CD that I found, which I loved. This is the bedtime storybook. So it's this illustrated booklet with the lyrics to bedtime story. Just throwing in another cool CD. Next stop, 2000 music. This is a very cool CD. Lots of CDs that came out with very cool things. So this has like a metal belt buckle on the cover. And again, obviously the amazing booklet on the inside for the music album. Music coming out was the year when I met Dan. I remember on one of our first dates, we had gone into central London and there was a copy of Time Out promoting the music album. And Dan helped me steal one of the big cardboard posters. I don't know where that ever went. I'm not sure if it's in the loft or somewhere else, but that was the beginning of our relationship. Stealing things from the street. The music album, I think in some ways will always be me and Dan's Madonna album. It was the album that I would play him when he came back to mine. It's the album that we danced to together. It holds such a special place. And wow, I mean, I can't believe that was 27 years ago almost. That's wild. But yeah, music always has special memories. I'm going to fast forward a bit now, also because I've been talking about this for nearly half an hour, to what I'm now going to call Confessions 1. There's some good merch for Confessions 1. This is the Confessions on a Dance Floor CD in a hard case that comes with a Confessions notebook. How nice is that? Not written in. And then the Confessions photo book, which is lots of pictures from the photo shoot and the CD itself. I mean, Confessions, we'll talk a bit about Confessions 2. Confessions 1, just the most incredible album. And I have a bit of an odd relationship with Confessions 1 because Dan and I got together in the music era in 2000. And then Confessions on a Dance Floor, which came out in 2006, was a bit of a dark time for us. Certainly for me, anyway. We'd been together for, coming up for 6 years. And I wasn't sure what I wanted in my life. And I said to Dan, I think I need a bit of a break. And we had a bit of time out together. And I moved out and we were apart for a few months. We describe it now as the dark times because it was horrible. I don't know what was going on for me, but I think I was rebelling against the heteronormativity of it all. Like between 2000 and 2006, we were in the most heteronormative relationship ever. We were just becoming those lovely gays next door. And something just didn't fit right for me, but I couldn't see any other models. I couldn't see any other ways of being that meant we could be together and be the people that we wanted to be. So that was a tough time. I remember us going to see the Confessions tour. We were there just as friends and I just felt sad. I felt very sad. And it was actually our friend Andrea's wedding to almost ex-husband. When Dan and I had decided that we were going to go together, and I don't know, I look back on that time and I think, what were we doing? I drove us there. It was up north. We got stuck in traffic for hours. We missed the wedding. We got there just as it was over and then decided to make the most of it. So we had a really nice evening, but we had booked a room together with 2 single beds. And I just remember crying and thinking, what have I done? I've made such a mistake. And then we drove back together, and in the car on the way back, I said, I think I've made a massive mistake. I don't think I want to live without you. I don't want to be without you. And Dan, I think initially was like, WTF, what have you just put me through? But through the kindness and generosity that he has, we then worked it out and we got back together, and that was 20 years ago. So yeah, Confessions, an odd relationship for that album. I do have the Attitude cover that Madonna did at that time. And then I don't know why I have these things because I don't have a record player. I haven't had a record player since I was a child, but I do have the Confessions double pink vinyl. still in its sleep. I was back in my picture disc era, so I've got the picture disc of Get Together and the picture disc of Jump, which amazing, amazing song. And then Confessions Remixed, the double album. Never played them, nothing to play them on. I'm going to fast forward like 20 years because I could just be going through this all day and we're almost at half an hour. I'm fast forwarding now to the Celebration tour and my little VIP pass. My friend Stuart and I went to the opening night of the Celebration tour, had just the most incredible time ever. We had paid ridiculous amounts of money for seats that were right along the side of the stage. And we got there and we sat down and we couldn't see anything because the stage was so high. And luckily Stuart said, no, not okay. We spoke to some of the production people and they were like, yeah, this is not okay. And they moved us into the dancing pit right at the front. So we got to see Madonna up front, up close, for this opening night of the Celebration tour. And I had no idea what to expect because, you know, for the past few years, we had just seen photos of her kind of looking more and more strange and behaving more strange. And then she was in a coma. We didn't know what was going to happen. And then the Celebration tour opening night was just a revelation. It was just the most incredible thing. Other than Blonde Ambition, which I hold such a deep place in my heart for, I think the Celebration tour was my favorite Madonna concert. And I was very lucky. On my 50th birthday, she was playing in London again. She came back and did another gig in London. And Dan got tickets for my 50th. And so we spent my 50th birthday together watching Madonna. I was remembering all of these moments from my life when she had appeared and she had some kind of significant impact. And turning 50, thinking about the fact I didn't think I was ever going to make it to 30, felt like it was the right place to be. Obviously, our lives had gone in very different directions. There she was on stage. There I was watching her on stage. But it felt incredible to be dancing to some of the songs that I danced to, into the groove, taking me all the way back, and then to still be here and to be in a good place and to be with Dan and to be feeling like life was just getting going. So that brings us to Confessions 2. Look at this beauty. Look at it, isn't it? Again, you know, an album, don't have anything to play it on. I think as I'm at half an hour, I'm going to stop now and maybe just do an extra bonus episode of the review of Confessions 2. It's only a week old, and so I think it's still settling. And I maybe need to give it a bit more thought before I go into committing anything to podcast about Confessions 2. But all I'll say is at the moment, this is possibly within my top 2 or 3 Madonna albums of all time right now. And yeah, I'm loving it. I'm going to stop there. Before I stop there, I'm just going to show you a few more things. Books of Madonna is my next podcast. This is a book called Madonna-rama, Essays on Sex and Popular Culture, that came out at a time when I was feeling very kind of clever and academic. And this is lots of, you know, there's great people like Bell Hooks has written something in here. This is all about Madonna and her relationship with sex. Encyclopedia Madonica, classic. This is such a great book put together with so much love. A history of Madonna. This one was wasted on me, but I like the pictures. Madonna Nudes. Let's just cover that up so it doesn't get censored. 1979. This is a collection of the nude photos that she did, which someone then stole and turned into a book. Look at this. Classic. Madonna and her pussy. Anyway, there's so many more things, but I'm going to stop there because it's been half an hour. This is supposed to be a really quick, like 10-minute thing every Monday, but I'm going to leave you there with gratitude that you came with me on my life in Madonna. I could do so much more. If you are a listener who's interested in coming on and talking about Madonna, I think the next best thing, reference. The next best thing for me to do would be to have someone to talk to about their relationship with Madonna. So let me know. This is not going to turn into a Madonna podcast, but for today, it is. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being queer. And I'll see you later this week with an amazing guest. My guest on the podcast this week is Layla McKay, who's an incredible writer. Layla has been on the podcast before. Her life has changed since the last time she was there. She's published another book. She has another one coming out. And you're going to hear some amazing stuff from Layla. But for now, thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for indulging me with this. And I'll see you soon.